So why op-ed writing? Why opinion writing? Why does it matter today? Especially when people are so entrenched and we think minds can't be changed. There are a few reasons why. And one is that opinion writing still matters. It still changes opinions. It still drives the news cycle. It still influences public policy. Opinion writing for some of the, I've worked with scientists over the years in different pieces that have been either submitted to me or I've worked with them on, and it can be used to place and influence grant work. It can, there's just any number of reasons why it matters today. But I'd say it matters because it can ultimately lead to a better understanding of issues that are complex. It can demystify things that people don't understand. It can persuade people in ways where their conversations and their engagements on your issues begin to persuade people. Look, this is not a panacea, but I will say that over my time running an opinion page and over the years since then of working with people on high impact pieces that run in high profile places, opinion writing matters. If you're thinking about your own personal and professional profile and how you can influence your world of expertise, it's a good way to build your profile. Landed opinion pieces lead to other media engagements. And so there are myriad reasons why I would encourage you to consider doing this. Opinion writing specifically. Now, this isn't, opinion writing, it's not just, it's not just, I have an idea, I have an opinion, I'm going to share it with the world. There's a sophistication to the craft that I hope will come out through this presentation. And it's why you. So look, I have opinions about a lot of things. I could not be on an editorial board for 8 years and not have opinions on a lot of things. I should be writing about very few of those things. And we had people who had different beats and different areas of expertise who did tackle certain specific topics. I have written pieces under my own byline many times. What I'll tell you is that why you, and it's a question you should ask yourself when you're thinking about it, is number one, what is my expertise? Number two, what is my personal experience? And then ideally, number three, do those two come together? They don't have to, but as with Ashley's piece, when they do, it's magnificent. And those are the pieces that really, really make you sit up in your chair and pay attention and lean in. Those are the pieces that often are the ones that change minds. Where can I use all of the years of education and expertise and work and the years of toiling and studying and late nights and overnighters, all of those things, where can you use that in the public sphere to change minds and influence people? And I would sometimes reach out to people if I read, a paper or something. I would reach out and try to get people to write. I would try to get academics to write on topics, and oftentimes it was twisting arms. It's not easy. It's not an easy craft, and I think anyone who entered the opinion writing contest will tell you that. But the gratitude at the end of it and the impact you can have is tremendous, and that's why a lot of people today, they have strong opinions. What they don't have is strong backgrounds. What they don't have is the expertise, and you do. So why now? I don't think I have to tell you why now. I mean, if you look at the last couple of years and the public dialogue and where it's gone and what, faux news and what's a fact and all of those things that we've all lived through, why now is self-evident. But I'll also tell you that it's easy to throw up our hands and say, why? Why does it matter? You've seen the polling around vaccines. So silver lining, if you look at the polling over vaccines, there has been a gradual movement. And whether it's because of, op-eds like the one that was just read to you, or whether it's at the ad council, or, there's a lot of influence, attempts at influence happening in these spaces. But why now on your issues? And that's something that after this session, I'd love you to spend a little time thinking about. How can you use your voice and your expertise now in this moment, and maybe next year, maybe the year after? And maybe there's a point in time where you'll be able to influence public thinking on something. But whether it be racial reckoning and injustices, if that's the place, whether it be climate change and the big UN climate summit that's happening at the end of October. What is the point in time when you can step out and make a difference in the public conversation? Anyone who would write for me, I would ask them to go through this little quick, almost like a pilot taking off checklist, and just to look through a few things and to think about things. And this isn't to dissuade anyone from doing this. This is just to ask you to check yourself before you engage in public opinion writing. Are you comfortable taking the position? Pretty easy. Is your organization comfortable with you doing so? Personal, professional risk. So I'm going to walk through now. This is kind of the guts of the presentation. This is where I feel like I am back in the newsroom. This is the stuff that's actually like the building of a piece. And again, this isn't just an op-ed. This is any type. These principles really go to any type of opinion writing. Bring an opinion and an insight. So I would get so many pieces from the world, academic world, research world, where there was just so much data and so much information, and I love it, but there's no opinion. And it's an opinion section. And this is a workshop about opinion writing. So you have to have an opinion. And a unique insight. If the topic and the approach you're taking, if you do a Google search and you have 5 screens full of people who have written what you're writing, you might not want to spend the time on it. But a unique insight can also be perspective. It can be your life experience. It can be, there are a lot of different winding paths that get to a unique insight, but bring at least the opinion or an insight, ideally both. And if you don't, an editor, if you pitch it and you have a good topic and an editor likes it, they're going to wring an opinion out of you anyway. So just come with it. Right, a great first line. This isn't necessarily a blog post where you're in control of it and you're not trying to land it. It's not, I think it's important. Like you like to start out anything in a positive way and to get people's attention, especially if you're asking them to give a few minutes of their life. But an editor, really, you need a good first line. You need a good lead. And I'm going to give you an example of a piece I worked on that published last week. And this is a gentleman, Dr. Blazakis. He worked in counterterrorism for a good long time, and it ran last week in the Washington Post. So I'll read this lead. For many Americans, the first searing image of terrorism was not of jets plunging into Manhattan skyscrapers or a smoldering Pentagon, but of a heroic firefighter cradling a soot-covered, lifeless infant in Oklahoma City. 2 white men, both Americans, had blown up a federal office building. That piece, coming into the 20th anniversary of 9/11, it's an important piece, and it lays out why domestic terrorism is a greater threat, at least in the United States, than international terrorism, which is it's a tough argument to make on the 20th anniversary, even if it's true. That lead was something we worked on, and it did one of the things that Dr. Blazakis that he said, 1995, that was when people started to understand what terrorism looked like in the United States, because it was up front and close. So that lead, I thought, was a really compelling way of encapsulating that. The nut graph, anywhere in a 750, 800, 900 word piece, you should have a pause point where you tell the reader where you're going to go. You tell the editor where you're going to go, because this is all, a couple inches of copy is how much an editor will see if they're considering where they're going to run your piece. And I won't read, you can read it on the screen, but the next graph there that begins domestic terrorism is the nut graph of this piece. And you can see it walks through, it contextualizes the moment, and that's something else that Ashley did really well, is just contextualizing vaccine hesitancy. But it ends in a place where it says, we must resist the urge to see the horrific suicide attacks in Afghanistan last month as a reason to return to dated strategies and tactics. And that's kind of where the piece would go. Have that pause point where you're really setting up the juice of your argument. So I say bring a news peg most times. You generally, an editor is going to want your piece to be relevant in the moment. Generally, there should be something in the news environment within the week or two that feels like your piece belongs. I think that's dated reasoning because today so many pieces are found through, searches. And there are many pieces where I get tricked by, I think time is one of the worst or best, I guess. The New Yorker is very good at this, where I'll get a New Yorker piece in my feed, and I'll start reading it. I'm into it, and I look and, oh, this is 2014. So, but anyway, most opinion pieces today, if you're going to a tier 1 publication, are going to ask you to be relevant in the moment, and so look for that. Don't get something arbitrary that really you kind of feel like you're just injecting it into the moment to have what's called a news peg. But look for something that feels more organic, because it's easy to spot the former when someone just writes it in and you go, all right, now pitch it. Engage your opponent's argument. This was one of the, I think the things I saw most commonly is that people didn't want to engage an opponent's argument. That's kind of where the hand-to-hand combat happens. And it's important to. It's how you persuade people. And B, it's just not interesting writing something that everyone's going to agree with. And if you're writing something with which no one will disagree, that's probably not going to be an op-ed either. So engage your opponent's argument, research your opponent's argument, take it on. If you have weaknesses in your own argument, elevate those weaknesses and hold them up and rationalize it. It's kind of what happens in an editorial board, by the way. You really do. You go into those and you have to be ready to engage. You have to be ready for people to take you on. And you should think the same way about opinion writing. You should be ready to take on the argument. You should be ready for someone to take on your argument. That's the good stuff. And you want to read. I'd spend time just as part of the building the craft of reading opinion sections and seeing how different people do it, because there are so many different ways to do it. These are principles. I hate rules in writing, but the principles are pretty sound, and I think you'll see these hold up pretty much anywhere you want to go. Write short, not really short. I mean, look, and this is really just to say, fit the platform. If you're writing for the New York Times, you can go up to in the 1,000-word range, but fit what an editor wants. The Post is very rigid about 850, and I'm sure, their Outlook, they can go for it, but just know the publication, because editors today are so overwhelmed and short on time that the more turnkey your piece is, the better chance you're going to have of landing it. And just kind of, I don't like rules, but follow their rules so you can at least have a chance of getting past the gatekeepers. Okay, there we go. Now I'll talk a little bit about pitching, and again, these principles. If you decide to take a piece and you feel like, yes, I would like to pitch it somewhere, here's a way to think about it. There is a way to do it. There's an etiquette to it. First, pick the right targets. And if you're working for an organization that you just have an idea for a piece, I would ask everyone to step back and let the piece get to its finish line before you decide where you're going to pitch it. And I say that because if there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen and the piece gets to the end and it doesn't look like it did at the beginning, you might be writing to the wrong thing. What I would say is write the piece you think that is the best piece for public sphere, and then figure out where you're going to go. Yes, everyone wants the New York Times and the Post and the Journal, where I get that. But that's not always the place you're also going to have the best impact. Is it a policy play? Maybe it is the Post. Is it broad? You want general readership. You want to hit people and influence individual one-on-one conversations at the kitchen table. Maybe it's USA Today. There are different ways to go about it, but just I would wait until you have a baked piece before you decide. So pitching etiquette, you want to establish relationship with editors, and that can come over time. But in general, you don't want to pick up a phone. You don't want to pester. You don't want to look at the websites. Ideally, if you can get an in and get to an editor, great. Keep it at length. Do all the things the principles I had in the last one. And then you're going to go one by one. You never want to double pitch. I had people who would pitch me and they would pitch the Washington Post or someone else at the same time and kind of see how it was going to play out. So go one at a time, wait for a rejection. And if you don't get it in the time, or wait for it, like you got it, you landed. I don't be negative here. And make sure that if you decide to go to another place, just send an email saying, hey, thank you for consideration, but I'm going to move on because I think this is timely, or whatever your rationale is. There were some funny ones where if you have a cover letter you've written for it, where I had some that said, we really hope that the Washington Post, that we think it's perfect for you and all this. And I worked at USA Today, so I would, if I had time, I would reply and I'd say, oh, this is a great piece you write for the Post, but I'm USA Today, so I don't. But just watch out for those little things that are easy to do when you're trying to land it in several places. And this is important. Protect your insights, protect your voice, protect what you want to say from editors. And I say this as an editor who would work with people, and I always give a final readback on pieces, but I also know what I thought would be provocative sometimes, and not provocative in a way that just to get clicks, because really when I was there, clicks didn't matter as much. But really what I thought would make an opinion stronger. And I would go at every piece as a contrarian. I would try to pick apart every piece. From the right, left, didn't matter. I was accused of being, a left-wing zealot and a right-wing zealot. So I knew I was doing something right. But don't let someone lead you to a place where it compromises how you're thinking about an issue, or how you would like to convey it, or just anything that gives you discomfort. Gently push back. And if the final piece isn't something that you want to have your byline for the rest of your life, then wave the red flag and stop and say, look, I have some concerns here. It's okay. You'll get published. If you got that far down the line, you'll get published, but don't let an editor drive you to places you don't want to be. And then the long game is really just the things that you would know to do, but I'm going to say, promote your piece. One of the things that helps you when you're pitching is that if you have a good, media following, if you have a good social media profile, those things. And if you build traffic around a piece, look, that's what matters. I mean, those clicks and things do matter today. But what really matters is, are people getting to see your ideas? Are people getting to see your research? Are people getting to understand how you think about this issue and why it matters and why it should matter to them? That's why you promote pieces. That's why you promote pieces. It elevates organizations. It shows what you're doing and the good work you're doing. So take the time. You go through all the work and all the thinking and all the blood, sweat, and tears to get to the point where you have a published op-ed. Spend the time and have your organization, if you have that support, spending the time promoting it and getting it to the places where it's going to influence people and do what you intended it to do when you sat down and decided to write. And then build on your ideas and keep improving. That's just, think about how you, whether it be a grant application or budding research or whatever it is in your world, think about what your process is to get there. And because I think that applying that, and this is my experience with people outside of journalism, is that everyone has their own way of doing it. And everyone has their own way of collecting ideas. I wake up at 2 a.m. and I'll have an idea for something and I'll start writing it into my phone. And I have a bunch of these ridiculous, crazy middle of the night ideas. And some of them are awful, but some of them are good. But whatever you do that works for you, do it, do it to create the ideas that might become opinion pieces, and create that process. This is where the long game is. And it's where, bouncing them off people who you respect, whether it be colleagues or whether it be family members, and making sure that what you're doing resonates in the right way. Trusted friends and colleagues are some of your best friends when it comes to opinion writing, because you don't want someone who's just going to tell you everything you do is brilliant, because if they do, either you really are brilliant and you don't need this session, or you need someone else who's going to give you some truth telling. And find the truth tellers, and it's going to make you a better writer and a better thinker when it comes to opinion writing. And cultivate relationships. If you land a piece, don't just go away, assuming it went well. I had a lot of people over the years, and some of them, it's really funny. I became friends with some who I never met, and they're people I now 20 years later who I'm still in touch with, who I met like one time, lives in Manhattan and wrote for me. But cultivate relationships with editors, because you can then you get to the point where you can say, hey, I'm thinking about writing in this space, and they'll still want to see a completed piece, but you can gauge whether there's interest. You can start to see what they're running. It's a way to get into the space of opinion writing and influencing that can be rewarding. It can be fun. It can be interesting, and ultimately it'll help you to get your ideas out in public forums.